Hello and welcome to yet another episode of the Ancient World Magazine podcast. I'm your host, Josho Brouwers, and I'm joined today by two Italian PhD researchers working at Leiden University, Renata Schiavo and Arianna Sacco. Both of them are Egyptologists, both of them are engaged in modern research into ancient Egypt, and that's what we'll be talking about. They will each introduce themselves briefly, starting with Renata.
I'm Renata Schiavo. I'm a PhD candidate at Leiden University. My main topic is ancient Egyptian religion, but with a special focus to a special kind of phenomena that did not involve directly the gods. So it's a bit strange, so I'm involved with belief relating to ghost or ancestor worship or demonology.
Egyptian religion, but with an emphasis on the supernatural elements, let's say.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm Mariana Sacco. I'm also a PhD candidate at Leiden University, and my research is about the material culture of the Second Intermediate period. So I'm studying the relations between the different places during this troubled period in which Egypt was separated politically and probably also culturally. And I use a methodology called network analysis.
Yeah, maybe for those who are not intimately familiar with Egyptian chronology, you can explain what the Second Intermediate...
So basically I study the types of objects that the places have in common, because that can tell me the relations between them. So what they were sharing, if they were sharing, which sides they shares more than others and are linked more than others.
But maybe you can also explain what the Second Intermediate period is.
Okay, the Second Intermediate period, we are talking more or less, there's a problem about the dates, but we are talking around 1800, more or less, up to 1550.
Yeah, and this is basically a divisional scheme for Egyptian history that was devised in the 19th century, where intermediate periods are periods where Egypt is unstable and politically fragmented, and you have other periods where Egypt is a united kingdom, basically, a single country, which are referred to as the Old, Middle and New Kingdom, and then you have the late period. So the intermediate period is between the Middle Kingdom, Middle Kingdom and the New Kingdom. Both very different research. Renata, I think yours focuses more on texts, doesn't it?
Yeah, of course. I used to translate several kinds of texts, both from, for example, the Greek literature. So we have this Greek literary tradition, like the coffin text or the pyramid text. But, and in my opinion, they could be also more interesting, also private text, like private letters, and in the specific, I'm focused on the so-called letters to the dead, that were effective letters that the Egyptian used to send to their deceased relatives.
Okay, so these were basically letters that they wrote to their dead ancestors.
Yes, it's something similar like when children write something to Santa Claus, no? But of course we are in another level, and these letters were written to solve several kinds of existential crises. So, for example, where a family cannot have a child, or to heal several kinds of disease, but we are also to imagine that, of course, it's not only we are not facing a simple private dimension, but it's all the family that is involved in this process. And for example, most of these letters were written to solve legal litigation about inheritance. So all the members of the family were involved.
Okay, so how did that work precisely?
This is what I try to understand with my research, because, okay, we have this kind of text, but the question is, okay, but because for a long time, several scholars sustain, okay, they were like prayers, no? So a single person used to used to write this text in order to ask a wish, like a prayer. And we don't know in which way the dead could work in effect. But it is my opinion instead, and not only my opinion, of course, there are several scholars were guessing this, is that probably there were special, complex rituals that involve a lot of people at the same time, probably inside the tombs of the deceased during a specific festival.
Mhm.
And it was a bit like Ordalic experience. Probably they used to make some ritual that involved some sculpture or some possession of a sculpture, and basing of something that happened, they could choose if, for example, one of two litigants was right.
Okay, so it was basically they just wrote their ideas on paper and then that was sort of used to determine who was right or not.
It's really hard to understand this because, of course, we have only these letters. Inside the text of these letters, we could find some reference, some sentences that, basing on which we could guess that there were some complex ritual. Because these letters, of course, the Egyptian used to read these letters to recite. Probably, if you make attention, the texts are in metrics. So maybe it was not a simple lecture, there was also something similar to a singer. But of course, it's all speculative. And there was a kind of ritual during which something happened with a sculpture, with a ritual that could define something that probably had an effectively value on the legal sphere, on the legal sphere.
Okay, and these letters, what were they written on? Were they written on papyrus or were they written on stone?
On several kinds of material, not only papyrus, but we have several of these texts that were written on a small bowl, like the one used for the offering. And probably they think that the spirit of the deceased came attracted by the food, and it was a way to stay in contact with the deceased.
So, but the letters were out in the open, basically. Anybody could read them?
And this is a good question. It's my opinion that probably there were some professionals who were allowed to write this kind of documents.
Yeah, because writing wasn't widespread, of course.
Yeah, of course, it was a not so common skill at the time. But we use that we could find some formulaic sentences that are quite recurrent. And if you could understand, of course, there is also sometimes we have really few documents, so it's hard to be sure about this. But sometimes you could recognize that the documents that came from a similar region are similar formulaic sentences that are different from the documents from other regions.
So yeah, interesting. Arianna is doing something completely different, of course, since your research focuses on archaeological material. Can you say something about the sources there for the Second Intermediate period?
For written sources, there are not so many. There are actually few, quite fragmentary. So we don't know we don't know precisely the political history of the period. We know in general the dynasties that were there, probably, but we don't know how one succeeded the others. We don't know the exact sequence of the kings in some cases. So the political history is quite obscure at that period. So other sources are, it's the material culture, basically. So we have beads, for example, we have pieces of jewelry, we have weapons, and some of them are quite distinctive because they are inspired by the Levant. So it's basically material coming from excavations, and which is nowadays actually found in museums, and that's a problem because it comes many times. This material comes from sites that have been excavated a century ago, or even more than a century ago. So when the standards were different, the methods used were different, and there are lots of data that are basically lost. We can just do anything with that. We don't have enough. And there is also one case in which the finds from the site are completely gone because they were destroyed. So the place where they were located got destroyed during the Second War. So it's gone completely. And we just have one report that is based on basically the excavation diary.
Yeah, well, the evidence is very fragmentary regardless of what you study, of course.
Yeah.
But yeah, for the second intermediate period, it's nightmarish, I understand.
Yeah. So. Apart from Avaris, which was one of the major cities, one of the capitals, if you want to call them, back then, this is the only site that has actually been extensively excavated, from which we have good data. It's the only one for which we really have it. And there are also a couple of sites that are excavating right now, so we had to wait results from there.
Yeah, publications can sometimes take very long before they're made available.
There is also a project which is dealing with dating these cemeteries or this material from the old excavations to refine a bit the history of the material culture during the second intermediate period. But yeah, it's still in the early stages, so we have to wait.
When you focus on the texts, Renata, you probably also have loads of problems as far as sources are concerned, or not?
Yeah, several problems, but and a different kind of problem. For example, when you are translating a private document, the problem is also a problem of interpretation, no? Because you can see some hieratic sign, and you could have problem to understand, okay, which kind of sign I'm facing, how I have to translate this, and after arrive also the interpretation. Instead, when you are translating a great literature, so you have several testimonies about this text, the problem is more about interpretation of the meaning, because sometimes they are rather obscure text. It means that they are speaking about supernatural or really strange phenomena, but at least when you find the right key of interpretation, everything seems more normal, and also the Egyptian religion seems more a religion of common people like us than something strange that involved the stars, the alien, and the stargate. It's really a nice experience sometimes.
No, but there's always a misconception with the Egyptian and with the ancient world. I mean, usually people see them like so far from us, or just like they are interested in treasures and nice things, but they were actually people like us, doing what we do, feeling what we feel.
Well, I'm totally agree with Arianna, no? Because the impression is that more you are studying, more you are understanding, and at least what you find really a man or a woman who has, I cannot say exactly the same kind of feelings we have, but it's something really in which you could recognize yourself too.
Yeah.
It's the most interesting part of this job is this one, when you find the real men and the real women that lived in ancient Egypt.
Yeah, it's also nice that we can see it for different aspects. I mean, I look at them through what they used, and Renata looks at them through what they were writing.
Yeah.
So it's also nice to see.
This is a nice observation, because I mean, also you are facing not only what they use, but what they really, the reality of everyday life, while I'm facing what they presume to be.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm really explaining, no? How the things could be in their ideal level.
Yeah, I think there are two important things. Both of you are not focusing on the treasures and the pyramids and the golden masks and all that sort of stuff. You're not focusing on the high level stuff.
No.
And at the same time, you're also showing that there's a lot of stuff that we still don't know about ancient Egypt.
Yeah.
I mean, in the popular conception, it's like ancient Egypt. Well, when you say I'm working on ancient Egypt, people will react with like, well, what do you have to study? We know everything, right? But there's still so much unknown.
Yeah, no, that happened to me. So I was in high school and I was talking with my classmates about what we would do after. And so I say, I want to go on study archaeology, specialize in Egyptian archaeology. And they say, but why? We know everything. They had discovered everything. There's so much not true. There's so much we don't know. And probably there are some phases, some periods of history in which we have more data, we have more information, some periods for which we have fewer data. But we still, there are many things that we don't know because they were using the thing, they were living with those things. And so why would they care to explain what they are? They were just using them, they knew. It's us, we don't use them anymore, we don't know. But for them it was clear. So of course it's also normal that we will never have all the information and all we need.
Egyptology and archaeology in general is not only something about the discovery, especially the big discovery, but it's something that connected with the interpretation of the text. Of course, you could find a new papyrus with a new text that nobody found before, but you have to translate this. And also to understand, because there are a lot of formulated sentences that, okay, we translate automatically in some ways, but we really don't understand still what they mean.
And what happens also often, and I think you can also say more about it, is that whatever we don't understand, okay, it's ritual. What does it mean?
Yeah.
Just what does it mean? It's ritual.
I mean, sometimes you have the impression that, especially in translating text, we are a bit lazy. Okay, we use translating this way, but we have still some problem. Okay, but what it means, what it really means, no? Especially for me, that I'm involved with religion, so I guess that it's one of the aspects of Egyptology that is more and more affected by stupid belief of modern people about ancient Egypt. I guess it could be problematic because, of course, on one hand, it's real that the modern Western mindset is strongly influenced by ideas that were born in ancient Egypt. But if this is true, on the other hand, the risk is that we start to underestimate several phenomena that instead are not still alive. Like the one I'm studying that involved the ghost, the ancestor, and for a long time, for example, Egyptology denied the existence of an ancestor worship before the first monography by Robert de Moret. If you read, for example, in several publications, ancient Egyptian, they didn't have an effective ancestor worship. It's 10 years that I'm studying this topic, and I seriously believe that it was one of the main aspects of their religion. And more I'm studying, I have reason to believe this, because of course we try the most, when we think to ancient Egyptian religion, we think, okay, the first civilization that have complex ideas about the afterlife, the mummification, life after death, the moral aspect, because there was a judgment of the dead, and this is something that survives also in modern mindset, in several modern religions. But of course, there were several aspects that also scholars for a long time denied, because they are something that appear more strange, more extravagant to us. They say, no, it cannot be. It doesn't fit with the common idea that people have with ancient Egypt.
Yeah, and I simply also a way to make it simpler or easier than what it really is. I mean, we have just so many questions that we can't answer, and even if you speak to, also when you speak to non-specialists, they want answers, and sometimes you just can't give them. It's very complicated, and it takes some courage to recognize it, because of course it's easier to focus on something monolithical, like, the pyramids or something like that. But there's much more, and the problem is that I think it's a failure of us as Egyptologists that we don't make a wider public more interested in these other kind of things. You always, whenever you read news about Egypt, it's always treasures, it's always an Atlantis, like with Heraklion, the site that they found underwater. Or it's always about the pyramids, it's always about Tutankhamun, it's always about these few things that people recognize, so they hold themselves to that. But there's so much more, and I think it's a failure that we can't make them see that.
Yeah, there's lots of stuff that's just so ingrained by now that it's difficult to change the modern perception of that. But to go sort of back to what you said about it being difficult to acknowledge that you don't know something, the bravest words you can utter in front of a class is to say "I don't know," is in my experience, and people appreciate it when you actually say "I don't know" instead of just making things up or proposing some sort of interpretation that is not very widespread or whatever. Just saying "I don't know" is useful.
Sometimes I don't know.
Sometimes it's very difficult, and mostly when you have to deal with getting your project to go on, or when you have to deal with getting funds. And then it's difficult in a proposal, or when you talk to somebody, you say, but I don't know. But there will be problems.
Yeah, it leads to some sensationalist reporting every once in a while, because they think like this way we will be able to get into the news and we'll be able to get more funding.
It's always here. Also because sometimes I think, who cares about the fact that the Egyptian used to consult the ghost in order to decide where to obtain the house of the deceased. So they want common people want to know about the tombs, about the treasure, about this strange practice that could be also a bit delusional about the idea that people not specialized have about the Egyptian religion, not because they want a certain kind of mysticism, a kind of esotericism, that of course they existed in the Egyptian religion. There was esotericism, there was a lot of speculation, but there was also this kind of beliefs that were it's wrong to call them popular, of course, but were something different from our common idea about ancient Egypt. And in my opinion, there are a lot of misunderstood about ancient Egyptian religion because we are denied or we are undervalued this aspect.
To go back to your letters in particular, do you cover a particular period, or is there a particular period for which the evidence is more?
I'm mainly focused between the end of Old Kingdom and Middle Kingdom, so also the first intermediate period.
First intermediate period, okay.
Main interest is to understand how certain phenomena of the Egyptian religion changed over time. Because the problem is that, if you study in a book, but also not only popularized book, also book, they say the ancient Egyptian religion was based on this, and this. Instead, of course, the religion was not always the same in 2,000 years. So I like to understand how some aspects change time by time.
No, but that's another big misconception about ancient Egypt. A country that has more than 3,000 years of history, just counting up to the birth of Christ.
Up until Cleopatra, let's say.
But by the way, has thousands and thousands of years of history. You can't expect that it's always the same. You can't expect that it doesn't change. Of course it changes, but just also this is an idea that is not enough conveyed. Even by Egyptologists, they sometimes still tend to analyze ancient Egypt like it was just once.
Yeah, there is this idea that Egypt is basically a monolithic unit, but it doesn't just apply to developments over time, like diachronic perspectives, let's say, but also with your research, and I'm guessing with Renata maybe also, regionalization is important. I mean, one region of Egypt isn't the same as the other regions. There are regional differences most of the time.
Yeah, but of course you have differences. You have differences in what they were using. You have differences even in burial customs. You have some slight differences, even in periods when they were politically united. So during during the Old Kingdom, during the Middle Kingdom, during the New Kingdom. So during these periods in which they were united, but you can still find slight differences. You can't compare one. It's not that one place is exactly the same as another. You even have different kind of environments. I mean, if you live in the Delta, you live in a kind of environment, and you have problems different than somebody living in Luxor or in the south or in an oasis. The oasis are also something else, are also different from the main valley and from the delta, but it's also an idea that is not enough conveyed.
Yeah, and it's sort of mystifying to me always, because if you look at modern countries, you have loads of differences there too. If you just look at Italy, people in the north and people in the south, or people on Sicily, it's all very different.
But another great problem is we really could speak about a great mystery of ancient Egypt is what about poor people? Because we have, of course, a lot of documents about the kings, about the royal family, about the elite, but of course there were a huge amount of poor people. We have really so few information about them, what they believe, who they have access to the afterlife or not. They have ritual involved with the ancestor worship, like the one involved to the elite, or it was because they work for an elite family and they have the concept of household, of extended family, so they were involved in the ancestor worship of the elite family to which they were connected, or our cult. It's something that, okay, we could arrive to it only in a speculative way. We have not the sources. This is so sad, in my opinion, no? Because it's also the cause of our misunderstood of ancient Egyptian civilization. Yes, a lot of treasures, okay, but because it's easier that a treasure remains over years, over millennia. But what about the poor people? How many burials of really poor people we know?
Yeah, but they were actually the mass. I mean, if you study the elite, you just study a very small portion. So what we have is basically for mostly a small portion, unless you study other kind of context. Like, this is something that you can well do with material culture. It shows you, it allows you more access to the lowest strata of a society and more to everyday life. And also that depends actually on the kinds of objects you are studying. Because there are of course some objects that tell another kind of history compared to others, so they give you different information.
And then again, it depends on when the excavations were conducted.
Also,
because back in the past, there was more of an emphasis on the riches instead of the basically the normal stuff that normal people used. So.
Yeah, but they had a whole different idea of archaeology, because archaeology is a science. So you studying, you formulate an hypothesis, and you study your data. You try to formulate an hypothesis. And that's not how they were seeing that.
Mm-hmm. And do you see regional differences in your research, or is that not a focus that?
Oh yeah, especially during the so-called intermediate period, you could recognize easily that there were a strong regionalization. But also when you are translating text, sometimes you can, perceive. You can recognize a kind of a dialectal substratum that, of course, it is not clear in hieroglyph, but it's okay, they use an N instead of a L, but only in this region, so it was a dialectal form that you can find just here, but it's really difficult because of both the kind of writing, but also because, of course, they try to use a standard language that it wasn't the language that they used to speak every day, but sometimes you can find something, okay, this is the kind of testify that here they have a kind of dialect or some pronunciation that was a bit different from the standard Egyptian, no?
So every once in a while the scribe's accent peeps through, basically. That's funny.
It's really funny, also because like in several other writing systems, Egyptian don't use to sign quite well the vowel. No, and so, I mean, to reconstruct in your mind the pronunciation, I mean, you could work on a text and to understand that it's metric after a couple of months. Maybe because I'm not so good, I have a lot to improve my skills, but after a while, you have to look at this, one day you read it, oh, but it's on metric. Of course, it was so accurate, it's full of figure of speech, it's so well written. And I recognize just now, after a month, I'm working on this text, no? So it could be rather hard sometimes.
We've only touched upon this, but we haven't really delved into it because we were talking about all these different periods. We're talking about, Old Kingdom, Middle Kingdom, New Kingdom, and then First Intermediate Period, Second Intermediate Period, Third Intermediate Period. But this is all basically a scheme that was invented in the 19th century, and it sort of seems like. Yeah, basically, when that sort of stuff was popular, you also see it, in Greece when you have early Minoan and middle Minoan, etc. So all these tripartite systems, basically, and then you have the late period for Egypt, which most Egyptologists don't seem to care about at all, because then you have the Persians and you have the Alexander the Great.
There are some universities in which they deal with that. Some university where they deal a lot with Roman Egypt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. But that becomes more classical archaeology rather than Egyptology at that particular point. It's not
of Roman provinces, I say archaeology of Roman province.
It is of course an heuristic distinction that could work because it's the tradition. It is the easiest way to understand each other at the moment. But on the other hand, we use Old Kingdom, First Intermediate Period, Middle Kingdom, Second Intermediate Period, and so on. But sometimes they really doesn't work. They really don't work. They really don't work. I mean, on this perspective, probably Kemp is right when he said, there is the big fracture, the great change, for example, with the advent of the Ramesside period, but because there is a big change in the power, there is an intellectual elite that and a new military elite that is rising. And this is a great change and a very big change. It is one of the break in the history of ancient Egypt. I reckon with the religious phenomenon I'm studying, you could clearly recognize that, for example, in ancestor worship, with the advent of the Ramesside age, there is a break, there is a great change. That I can recognize more this with the rise of the Ramesside age than with the passage from Old Kingdom to First Intermediate Period. Because of course, the First Intermediate Period is the phase in which we have more and more data for the first time related to the ancestor worship. But they are something that they develop from previous data. You could easily follow a regular transition. It's not a breakup. Instead, with the advent of the Ramesside,
it's more of a trend.
We have a great innovation instead with the advent of the Ramesside age. Yeah. Because it was something really related to the intellectual elite, with the people who had really the skills to write, could manage the written system. And after we have other phenomena that are more connected with a military elite.
Yeah, but it's also true that there are some changes that are more significant than others, and it's also true that some political changes don't mean immediately a change in the material culture or in their mentality. It's also something that you can see with the Second Intermediate Period. There are some types of objects that they just keep using. There's not such a sudden break just because it's not a king for the whole Egypt anymore, but they have different rulers. This doesn't mean that people immediately stops using what they were using. There's still a continuation Of course, there are some new types, some new shapes that gets introduced, some materials that are more used than others, but there's not a sudden break.
But the chronology of ancient Egypt also isn't as firm sometimes as maybe a lot of people believe. A lot of discussion going on. I mean, with Kitchen's reconstruction of the third intermediate period. There's the book Centuries of Darkness by Peter James and Nick Thorpe that delved into the whole chronology issue, and they have a very radical proposition how to restructure it. It's probably too radical, but it's still it shows all the problems that are inherent in this particular system, especially since the dynasties are all based on the lists that Manito created.
Yeah, the Turin, the canon, the royal canon of Turin, as they call it.
So it's there's a lot of discussion there. I mean, I know from your research that there are these dynasties that sometimes exist side by side instead of one after the other.
Coexisted, but you can't see that from the document because they are just reported one after the other. So it's never clear if they coexisted or if they came one after the other.
Yeah. And the interesting thing is that the Egyptian chronology is used to date other areas of the Mediterranean. So if the Egyptian chronology isn't completely accurate, it means that chronologies elsewhere in the Mediterranean are also dubious, which is problematic sometimes.
Yeah. No, but even with the chronology, with the absolute dates, there's also a problem. Even with periods that are, say, better known, like the Middle Kingdom. I mean, it's all reconstructed based on astronomical events, and to make it very short. But also that it's never 100% sure. Even we have a higher chronology, we have a lower chronology, so sometimes some scholars think that the date should be put back more towards
dated earlier.
Earlier. Mm-hmm. Others think that they should be dated, that the dates should be lower, so they should be dated later. And what it is always a problem. So even for the second intermediate period, the absolute dates have been reconstructed based on dates found in the New Kingdom and in the Middle Kingdom. So we don't have any astronomical dates coming from documents of the second intermediate period. Now, and even what has happened with Tel el-Daba, with Avaris, which was, as I say, one of the most important city, was the capital, one of the regions in which Egypt was divided. So the excavator excavated it and did a whole reconstruction of the strata and dated the strata based also on the documents and the written evidence that we have. But examining the carbon dates of the objects coming from Tel el-Daba, it seems that the dates should be at least 120 years higher than that.
So earlier.
Yeah. So we just dealing with absolute dates is a mess.
Yeah, which is one of the reasons that you use relative dating. And the further back in time you go, the more inaccurate it becomes usually, especially for the ancient world.
We are touching one of the most problematic aspects of Egyptology. Because of course we have a huge amount of data, we have a lot of text, we have something that in other example, I guess people involved with ancient Etruscan, no? Really few documents of people involved with Ugaritic text. In comparison, we have really a few amount of data. We have a lot of data, but on the other hand, it's like makes Egyptologists a bit lazier than other scholars. It's a bad thing to say, but sometimes I have this sensation. But it's not, of course, an impression of mine. There is a wonderful paper by Moreno Garcia. I don't know if it is the right pronunciation of the name. Is Spanish, but actually is working in Paris. The paper is entitled "The Cursed Discipline." No, he explains all the main problems of Egyptology. That there is this frantic desire of new discoveries, of new objects, the beautiful object in the museum, and instead we have some problem in studying boring material stuff, but not also material culture, as Arianna also. What about the love and the moral in ancient Egypt? How worked the economical system? It's really hard to find somebody who specializes in this kind of subject. And you say, but you are studying religion. My conclusion is that if you don't understand the economical and the social system, you will never understand the religion. They seem really strange. Their text could seem really strange sentences because they are describing something mystical, something mysterious. No, we don't understand them because we are not able to fit them in their social and also economical context. Because sometimes they are speaking about really practical things. So they text that things, they are evoking ghosts, they are doing something terrible. Some scholars speak about Egyptian shamanism, that for me is totally crazy. Instead, it was a legal procedure for a litigation about inheritance. This is because nobody studied quite well the economical and the legal system, and so these sentences appear rather strange. We have the idea of the Egypt and the mystery, and we continue to misunderstand this kind of text. It's a problem.
Yeah. No, but I think also a problem is that we don't talk enough with each other. I mean, if there's somebody that deals with the economics in ancient Egypt or with the legal system in ancient Egypt, even if there's somebody dealing with that, but just we don't talk to each other.
But not only we don't talk to each other, but there's some problem in using multidisciplinary approaches.
Yeah.
I mean, I had really a self-formation. I had both a master in Egyptology, but also a master in history of religion. Sometimes, I mean, study religion is not something that involves your spiritual attitude. It's a scientific discipline. You need a method. And I read a lot of paper, a lot of work that doesn't show methods, a correct methodology.
No, but there's always a problem of conflicts between fields, between areas, that sometimes you don't know how to define. It's not that you don't know, but there's always a conflict on how you define yourself. If you want to define more yourself on the place that you are studying, or more based on the topic that you are studying, or on the discipline. Like with me, you could well say that I'm an archaeologist, but I'm also an Egyptologist. So sometimes that there is a bit of the border is unclear. Even though I don't think this should be much of a problem. I mean, you can be one and the other.
Mm-hmm.
From my perspective, the border has to be unclear. I mean, of course, we need a person that are really good, specialized in archaeology or in network analysis, and one person cannot know everything. But on the other hand, I mean, for me, the borders between an Egyptology, an anthropology, and a scholar involved in history of religion does not exist.
No, it shouldn't exist. Yeah, but it's also an institutional problem. I mean, if you work at a university, if you define yourself a historian of religion, then you will work in a department. But if you define yourself an Egyptologist, then maybe you will work in another department. If you define yourself as an archaeologist, then you would then refer to another one. So it's also a bit of an institutional problem. Sometimes there are labels that are needed, and you can't avoid that sometimes, even though there shouldn't exist any conflict when you actually do research.
I mean,
well, they keep cutting back at universities, so more and more departments are being merged. So it might solve itself out of necessity.
Or you can choose. I don't care. I go straight, and I will see what happens.
No, but I mean, even with me, I'm trying to introduce a method which comes from the social sciences, and nobody has done that in Egyptian archaeology. Right? It has been used in Greek archaeology. It has been used by scholars studying Vikings. It has been used by Roman archaeologists, but no Egyptologists have ever done that.
No, but I suggest again you have to read this paper by Moreno Garcia, because it makes the perfect picture of Egyptology today. what is right, what is wrong, where we had to go, and which is the wrong way. It opened my mind a lot.
And this is a good point to end the episode. We hope you've enjoyed it. If you want to learn more about us, visit the website at ancientworldmagazine.com. Hope to see you next time. Thanks again.